Hey everybody, Dr. Sean Talbot here. Thanks for joining me for tonight's masterclass. We're going to talk about the longevity revolution. And some of you have heard me talk about longevity before from the perspective of the microbiome. The general idea being that if you can keep your microbiome, the bacteria in your gut, if you can keep them young, is sort of in quotes, meaning we can make them as resilient and as diverse as possible, that can keep the entire organism young, which is you and me, right? So a young microbiome equals a young organism. And in that master class, which you can find on my YouTube channel, we talked about microbiome transplants where you take the microbiome from a young mouse and you put it into an old mouse, and the old mouse becomes young on all these parameters. Their inflammation goes down and their immune system gets stronger and they become more active and they remember better, and all the different things. They look like a young mouse and behave like a young mouse in every way that you can measure. We're going to talk about it in a little bit different perspective tonight. And so the longevity revolution, why living longer isn't enough, how to maximize your health span, your brain span, and your adaptive capacity, which is basically your ability not just to handle stress, but to bounce back and come back from that stress even stronger than you were in the first place. Okay, so that's what we're going to talk about tonight. So I want to start with a question, which is, do you want to live to be 100? Right? And I think if I could see you all, I think there would be a lot of hands that would be going up, right? Yeah, of course I want to live to be 100. But if somebody asked that to me, I would say it depends. I would like to live to be 100, but it would depend on a couple of answers. Am I physically healthy? Am I mentally there? You know what I mean by that? Can I move around comfortably without pain, without frailty? Am I enjoying life, right? I don't want to live to be 100 if I, live healthily until 80, and then the last 20 years of my life, I'm hooked up to machines and I can't remember who I am or who you are. I don't want to be physically frail. I don't want to be in pain. I don't want to be confused all the time. Like I would prefer to just say, well, forget it. I'll just stop at 80, right? I don't want those crummy 20 years, right? So that's what I mean when I say it depends, right? It's not necessarily about the number of years that you live. It's about the number of years that you're able to fully live. And I think that's an important consideration for a lot of people, right? I'm not getting any younger. I don't know if you're getting any younger. I'm certainly doing everything that I can to slow the hands of time. But it really is about this. Like, are you agile or are you fragile? I don't think we want to be. I don't think we want to be that. So we're going to talk about some of those principles tonight as we go through this masterclass. So in my other seminars where I talk about longevity and the principles of longevity, sometimes we will use this little bullseye kind of a chart that you see on the right hand side. Why we age. It's not just one thing. It's a combination of, this chart is called the hallmarks of aging. There are some primary hallmarks. There are some like sort of secondary hallmarks. There's some that are integrated. There are some that are antagonistic. I'm not going to go through all of these. If you want to see my discussion of that, go find on my YouTube channel. Go find my other couple of master classes about longevity, where I do go through each one of those, and I'll talk specifically about how we manage dysbiosis, how we manage chronic inflammation, how we manage mitochondrial dysfunction, et cetera, et cetera. I'm not going to do that in this one. I'm going to try to simplify it a little bit, but suffice to say that it's never one of these. It could be one of these that predominates, or it could be one of these in a particular individual that is the hallmark of the hallmarks, that is the one that we really want to focus on. But it's typically many small things happening all at the same time. You have a little bit too much inflammation, you have a little bit of metabolic dysfunction, you have a little bit of mitochondrial decline, a little bit of muscle loss, a little bit of immune system aging, a little bit of microbiome aging. And so that's both bad news and good news. The bad news is that there's a lot of things that can go wrong. The good news is there are a lot of places that we can intervene. And if we can just intervene a little bit, you really do get a synergistic benefit. So I'll give you an example. If you improve your microbiome, that very often will improve your immune system. Even though you didn't do anything directly to your immune system, you got a benefit because you improved what was happening at the level of your microbiome. Because of that, you're going to see a change in your level of inflammation. So you maybe get that idea, right? You can intervene at one point and get a cascade effect in a good way in some of those other areas. You might be anticipating where I'm going next. It also goes the other direction. The dominoes fall both directions. They can also fall in a negative direction. So if your microbiome is dysbiotic, right, out of balance, you might have bacteria that are producing too much of these inflammatory compounds that we call cytokines. That can lead to problems that we would call leaky gut, problems with your gut barrier integrity. That can lead to problems with your immune system. And so you can see where your dominoes are going in the wrong direction. And so, do you need to set up, like, restore balance across all those four dominoes? Maybe, but maybe you could restore balance in one of those dominoes, and then that helps the balance in the next domino, and the next domino, and the next domino. So when we talk about these hallmarks of aging, I find it sometimes is more beneficial, instead of talking about them all individually, is sometimes I like to put them into buckets. There's a damage bucket where we can intervene at those hallmarks to reduce damage in the body, reduce damage to your DNA, reduce damage to your cell membranes, etc. There's a bucket of energy or metabolism, you could call it, where we're focusing on your mitochondria and your metabolic flexibility, which is basically your ability to shift between different energy sources. Are you burning fat? Are you burning carbohydrates? Are you burning proteins, which is basically breaking down muscles? Communication. This is the signaling across the gut-brain axis, right? This is your hormones and your neurotransmitters and the compounds that your immune system makes that govern your inflammation, called cytokines. And there's an aspect of repair. So, anytime we get damaged, are we able to repair that damage and rebuild the tissue, hopefully rebuild it stronger, so that you're able to withstand an even greater stress later on. That's the concept of adaptive capacity. We'll talk a little bit tonight. And that's autophagy. That's your body's ability to break down dysfunctional proteins. It's sleep, which is good for your body and your mind. I'm not going to talk about sleep very much tonight, but if you are interested in sleep, I have entire masterclasses on sleep that you can find on my YouTube channel. The balance between recovery and repair. So putting it in these four main buckets, I think sometimes is easier for us to focus on, because then we can ask ourselves the question: how can I reduce some of this damage? And or how can I enhance my repair mechanisms? How can I improve the signals that are going across my gut-brain axis? How can I improve my overall metabolism and my energy levels and things like that? So it just makes it a little bit easier for us to discuss. The sort of whole idea here is that we want to make sure that we are reducing the accumulation of damage over the course of our lifespan. So we want to make sure that if we are accumulating, or if we are being damaged, that we're not accumulating that damage, that we're able to accelerate our repair mechanisms, that kind of thing. Because aging, really, or frailty, or what we sometimes call unsuccessful aging, really is an accumulation of bad information, too much damage, poor repair capacity, inability to send and receive signals across those symptoms. And if we can lessen that, then we can lessen what we observe as the aging process. Okay, so if this is the first time you're tuning into one of my master classes, I am a psychonutritionist. I am a nutritional biochemist who studies the link between food and mood. That's an easy way for us to sort of kick this off. You can see all the other bullet points there. I'm not going to belabor any of them, but I've been doing this for a long time, about 3 decades. The company that I run is called 3 Waves Wellness. We are a startup star for 2026. We're the holistic mental fitness company. We run a mental fitness retreat in coastal Massachusetts. I train people to become mental wellness coaches, certified mental wellness coaches. Our program is certified or approved for continuing education units by, all of the leading health organizations out there: American College of Sports Medicine, American Institute of Stress, et cetera, et cetera. We have a very robust mental fitness community where, online community where like these slides reside, where we get people together to talk about ways to improve our own mental fitness, the mental fitness of our clients. If you see clients, this could be your energy levels, it could be your mood, it could be your mental acuity, your sharpness, it could be your sleep quality, it could be how you bounce back from adversities, it could be anything that fall under that mental fitness community. And we have a line of science-based nutraceuticals and an affiliate program, so people can share our stress chocolates or share our Zenith, which is our flagship resilience product that helps you deal with stress better. And our new product that's coming soon called Zephyr, which is about helping people sleep more soundly. It helps you fall asleep, helps you stay asleep, helps you with sleep quality, helps you repair the damage that you accumulated during the day. It helps you repair better overnight. We're really excited for it, so please stay tuned for that. We also run retreats. Our next retreat that we have openings for is September 17th here in Plymouth, Massachusetts. Here you can see a picture of our nice little goodie bag, which is worth about $300. It's not a typical spa retreat. It's very, very science-based. We talk about science-based strategies that are both science-based and practical for people to learn while you're at our retreat, and then take them back to your world, to your real life, so that you can practice them, so you can improve, use food to improve your mood, use nature exposure to improve your stress resilience, use movement to control your inflammation and your metabolic flexibility, those sorts of things, right? So very science-based, but also practical. You can see some of that here. If you're interested in this kind of thing, go and look at my other masterclass, where I take about 30 minutes to really dive into what you're going to experience at this retreat. People who come to them, they leave saying it was the best experience of any retreat that they've ever been to. And we get a lot of people who have been to a lot of retreats, right? It's very high touch. You're going to be spending a lot of time with me. We're going to be sitting around the fire pit. We're going to be going whale watching. We're going to be walking on the beach. We're going to be having some lectures like this. We're going to be learning. We're going to be doing, and we're going to be taking that back from a practical perspective, so people can get some real lasting results. Okay, so let's get into our topic tonight. So we're talking about longevity. But one of the concepts that I want you to understand about longevity is that, and I alluded to this a little bit, it's not just about living longer, it's about living better. And a big piece of that living better is the concept that you see on the screen right now. It's something that I call adaptive capacity. You could also call this resilience, and sometimes I do refer to it as resilience. It's your ability to adapt, recover, and thrive in everyday life. And if you have good adaptive capacity, you're able to not just withstand stress and absorb that stress, but you're able to bounce back from and adapt to that stress. If you're able to do that at a high level, you age better, right? You have what we call successful aging. You don't become fragile. You don't become frail. You maintain your muscle mass. You maintain your cardiorespiratory fitness. You maintain your mental faculties. You maintain your metabolism. So what you see around here are all the sort of outcomes of adaptive capacity, right? Nobody says, oh, my adaptive capacity is really good today, right? We don't talk that way. That's more of a scientific way of describing it. If you come to one of our retreats, you'll learn all about how to improve your adaptive capacity. But what it means for you is that your mood is better, and your motivation is better, and your metabolism is better, and your energy levels, and your mental focus, and your immune support, and your stress resilience are all connected and interdependent and influence each other, right? When one rises, they all rise. Unfortunately, when one, takes a hit, they all take a hit. But if you're more resilient, if you have higher adaptive capacity, you can take that hit and come back from that hit. Okay? So that's the general idea. Too often we see people who are in this, what's on the left-hand side of this graphic. You're in this downward spiral, right? You're having a poor diet, right? This is just to illustrate the situation that a lot of people find themselves in. That leads to gut disruption. That leads to inflammation. That leads to stress reactivity. That leads to poor sleep and brain fog and low motivation. And then you start making worse choices, right? You have stress eating, and then you feel too tired and you don't exercise, and you stay up too late scrolling Instagram and you don't get a good night's sleep, or you try to go to sleep and your brain won't shut down and you can't get a good night's sleep, and that leads to further decline, right? Terrible, negative, vicious cycle of a little bit worse, a little bit worse, a little bit worse, right? We need to break that somehow. And the way to do that is to change it into a positive cycle, or what I call a virtuous cycle, where we change your diet. We harness that mood-food connection. We give you better gut health. That leads to less inflammation, better neurotransmitter balance, better mood, more motivation, better habits, better metabolism, better energy, greater resilience. That's adaptive capacity. I'm saying it very, very quickly because I have deep dives, masterclasses, where I go into this in excruciating detail. So if you like that kind of stuff, by all means, subscribe to the YouTube channel, join our mental fitness community. Our mental fitness community is $300 lifetime access. You get access not just to these slides and these kinds of lectures, but you get access to deep dives about serotonin metabolism, deep dives about the immune system, deep dives about dopamine, deep dives about melatonin and sleep quality. You get access to our discussion area. You get access to all the things that I post about new research that came out this week, and here's what it means for the Mediterranean diet and your risk for Alzheimer's disease and things like that. So there's lots of really, really good stuff there. If you do our certification, the Certified Mental Wellness Coach program, you get access to the community for free. It just comes as part of the bundle that we do. So check out my website, doctalbot.com, and you'll be able to see all the information about that kind of stuff. So we're talking about longevity. So let's get back to that. How to stay young. Well, what is the fountain of youth, right? How people have been searching this forever, and science has discovered it. Like I can legitimately say that there are 4 things that if you focus on them and improve them, you will delay the aging process, right? Not to say that you will stop the aging process, right? We all age at different rates. Some of us age faster, some of us age slower. We can never truly stop the aging process. But if you focus on these 4 things, you will do a pretty darn good job based on what the science right now tells us. Okay? Do you want to know what they are? You probably do. So the first one is muscle, and I'm going to go into each one of these in turn. The second one is cardio, or not cardio exercise, but improving your cardiorespiratory fitness. I'll talk about that. The next one is brain exercise, getting your brain to do what it needs to do. And the fourth one is the microbiome, right? So I talked about that a little bit at the beginning. If you keep your microbiome young, so to speak, that keeps the whole organism young. So which of these should you focus on? You should focus on all of them. We talk about them at our retreat. We also talk about them in our master classes like this. So the 4 pillars of longevity, science is revealing what helps us live not just longer, but better for longer. Okay, so that it's not just living to be 100, it's living to be 100 and be healthy for all 100 of those years. So muscle is the organ of longevity. This is something that we are really, really not just learning about, but the science is supporting this over and over and over again. And it really is one of the biggest shifts in all of aging science. Muscle just isn't for movement, it's an endocrine organ. Every time we contract one of our muscles, right? And I'm doing my bicep right now, or I could do this, and it could be my legs, right? Anytime we contract a muscle, our muscle makes these compounds called myokines. Myo means muscle, kine means signaling molecule. So myokines are signaling molecules that come from our muscles. Myokines signal things like glucose control, anti-inflammatory effects. There's a brain balancing benefit from myokines. In fact, the brain benefit is sometimes myokines are called hope molecules because they reduce stress, they improve empathy, they make us more likely that we want to connect with other people. So there's a lot there. There's a lot that goes in there. Muscles help with our balance, right, so that we don't fall over and break a hip as we age, and help with our independence, right? If you're frail and you don't have the muscle strength, you can't get around. But it's not just about falling over. It's not just from being able to get from point A to point B without a walker or a wheelchair. It really centers on some of these metabolic effects, that if you have more muscle, and you don't have to be like a big muscle bound gorilla kind of a person. If you just have more muscle versus less muscle, your metabolism is better, your brain function is better, your overall hormonal balance and signaling across your body brain biome is better. And so this is one of the reasons that we really recommend that people move their bodies. We recommend that people lift weights. I'm a fellow of the American College of Sports Medicine, and we have a saying in ACSM that exercise is medicine, right? I think it should be a little bit less intense than that, actually. I think that movement is medicine. And any kind of moving around that can maintain your muscle mass and get your muscles to contract and make those myokines is gonna be good for your overall health and especially for your longevity. The second one, oh look, and there I have it right there at the bottom. Movement is medicine, okay? But now we're talking about cardiorespiratory fitness. Another one of the big measurements that can be very much a predictor for how you're going to age in the future is something called VO2 max. VO2 max, if you're an athlete, you understand VO2 max is your ability to take up and use oxygen. So if you have a high VO2 max, you're probably a better endurance athlete, right? So a cross-country skier, a cyclist, a marathon runner all tend to have very high VO2 maxes, and coincidentally, those are athletic populations that tend to live a long time, right? They have a long lifespan. So VO2 max is one of the strongest predictors of longevity. So just being more fit. That makes sense, right? If you're more fit, physically fit, you're going to live longer. But part of it is that if you can take up and use oxygen, efficiently, your metabolism is better. So this is one of the key hallmarks that we'll measure in people. If their cardiorespiratory fitness, if their VO2 max level starts to go low, or if it's starting low to begin with, and they don't have very very far to go before it gets bad, that's a red flag for them to age unsuccessfully. That's a red flag for them to become frail in the not too distant future. Okay, so that means that endurance exercise, cycling, running, walking, stair mastering. I do a lot. I live on the coast, so I do a lot of paddling and things like that. Those are all things that are going to help your lungs and your heart and your blood vessels and your circulation all work better. You don't just get a body benefit, though, right? Cardiorespiratory fitness is also related to your overall brain function, which is the next one. The brain loves exercise. So your brain loves muscle exercise. So go to the gym and lift weights. Your brain loves endurance exercise. So get out there and pedal or walk or run or whatever it is you like to do. My daughter is a certified Pilates instructor, right? So I would put that in the category as well. Also, when you're exercising, you're increasing something called BDNF, brain-derived neurotrophic factor, you're increasing blood flow, you're stimulating neuroplasticity, which is your brain's ability to grow and learn and develop new neurons and connections. It improves your insulin sensitivity, so your blood sugar balance is better, and that better blood sugar balance makes your brain work better because your brain thrives on glucose metabolism. It's good for your mood, it's good for your memory. But this exercise, the brain loves exercise, isn't just cardiovascular exercise, endurance exercise, isn't just strength training. It's also thought exercise. It's being curious. It's learning an instrument. It's learning a language. It's traveling. It's talking to other people. It's connection. It's all of that kind of stuff where, a lot of times I as a nutritionist, I talk about the nutrients that we feed ourselves, right? What do we eat that is nourishing our bodies? I also talk about, when I talk about mindset, I talk about what are the thoughts that you're feeding your brain. That is just as important, right? Are you reading? Are you listening to interesting things? Are you remaining curious? Are you solving puzzles? Those are all things where your brain is exercising separate from the kinds of exercise that I just talked about here in number 1 and number 2. Okay, so those are important. And then the last one is the one that I started with, which is the microbiome. The microbiome ages too. And so an older microbiome, right? When we say that our microbiome is aging, we're talking about a loss of diversity. We're talking about an increase in inflammation that leads to more frailty, leads to more disease. And so there are rodent studies that show this. There are human studies that show this. Healthy centenarians, which are people who are 100 years or older, often have remarkably diverse microbiomes. So that seems to be one of the signals that if we can keep our microbiome diverse and resilient, that can be good for the microbiome, can be good for our mood, but can also be good for our aging process, right? And the way to keep your microbiome diverse and resilient is to eat a diet that is diverse and resilient. And that's why we'll talk about the Mediterranean diet. We'll talk about lots of plants. We'll talk about, the 30 plant challenge, those sorts of things. So that's all I'm going to say about that. If you're more interested in this number 4, please definitely go and look at one of my other master classes about longevity from the perspective of the microbiome. I really go into some of the really cool research studies. But these 4 systems work together. If we invest in them every day, we're going to live better for longer, right? That's the moral of the story, right? It's not just that one of these is more important than the others. I don't know if they're equally important, right? One of them might be more important for a particular person, right? If you're an endurance junkie, maybe you need to dial that down a little bit so that you have space to go to the gym, once or twice, or do some push-ups, or do some body weight exercises, or something like that, right? It's about balance, right? Not doing one of these in exclusion to the others. Okay, so there's that. There's this other concept about aging where we talk about biological age versus chronological age. So chronological age is easy. That's how many candles are on the cake, right? So on my cake, in about a month, I'm going to turn from 58. I'm going to turn to 59, right? So that's how many years I've lived. That's how many years I've been on the planet. It's fixed. It increases 1 year at a time, and you can't change it. Whereas biological age is how old our cells are functioning, right? So you can do, there are lots of sort of biological aging clocks that you can use in, scientific studies. How old your cells are, how old your systems are, how old your organs are. So theoretically, you could have a liver that is one age, and you could have lungs that are another age, and you could have a brain that is another age, right? So instead of them all being 58, one of them could be 50, like a good healthy liver, but your lungs, because you were a smoker, are a lot older. They're 90-year-old lungs. So, you get the idea about that. And there's fun ways that you can do this. You can go online and you can find one of the biological age calculators, and you can put in your information. You can track it sometimes. A lot of the fitness trackers, like the Oura Ring or the Whoop Band or the Apple Watch or those sorts of things, they will sometimes give you a biological age versus chronological age. And you always hope that, if you're 58 in your chronological age, that you're only 55 or 52 or something like that in your biological age, to show that you're doing the right things, and that is, slowing the aging process for you. But it really is, we can use lifestyle to change that. We can use lifestyle changes so that these little changes in your inflammatory profile, or your mitochondrial function, or your autophagy, or your ability to repair, or any of those things that I talked about before, if we can nudge those a little in the right direction, you can push down that biological age. You're not going to change the chronological age, but the real measure of aging is how well your body and brain are functioning. It doesn't necessarily mean when I open the app on my phone and I can say, oh, look, my biological age is 52, whereas my chronological age is 58, pat myself on the back. Okay, I'm 6 years younger biologically. Well, who cares unless I feel 6 years younger, right? What does my energy feel like? What does my mental focus look like? What is my motivation? What am I excited to go out there and do? Am I still curious? Am I still engaged? Those sorts of things are the things that are really, really important. But they all add up from all these different signals that we do. So what influences your biological age? It's your exercise and your sleep quality and your nutrition and your stress management and your social connections. Some of the things that I talk about when I talk about the Sense program that I write about, in all the different books that I've written, right? The Sense program features prominently because it's not only scientifically validated based on this biochemical approach, but it's also doable. It's something that anybody can plug into their lives at any time. And as a result of that, you improve something like your adaptive capacity. We can actually measure your adaptive capacity index, and we can show you where you are right now. Are you low, medium, high? And based on that, we can figure out what within that adaptive capacity index is your primary limiter. Do we want to focus on your nutrition? Well, maybe your nutrition is awful, and yes, we do want to focus there. Maybe your nutrition is really dialed in, and we need to focus on your sleep quality. And once we focus on your sleep quality and we get that dialed in, then we can go and focus on something else. So it really is about figuring out what are the key biological systems that are causing you to age faster and bringing them back so that you age slower, right? So we can change your biological age, which is great, but what I really care about is that you end up feeling better and performing better and getting that mental edge back like you had before, and that you feel and function as a younger version of yourself. So the goal isn't just to add years to your life, it's to add life to your years, and those are some of the things that we can track. So how do we do that? What are some of the approaches that we take to help people go in that right direction? Well, you might have heard of this concept called the blue zones. These areas of the world where people seem to be living longer, and not just living longer, living better for longer, right? So, they're not just living to be 100 years old. They're living to be 100 years old, and they have good health along that entire way. Their mood is good. Their cognition is good. Their physical function is good. They're not becoming frail in those later years, right? And so the blue zones, the original blue zones, there's a couple more, since the original publication of this. Loma Linda, California. This is a particular population of Seventh-day Adventists who are vegans, and so they have a very dialed-in diet, but they also have very good social connections. They're also very physically active. Costa Rica, Sardinia, Italy, Ikaria, Greece, Okinawa, Japan. And so the blue zones, studying the people who live in those blue zones where they live a long time and have, all those wonderful benefits that I just rattled off. What are some of the things that we can observe that they are doing on a consistent basis? And maybe that can teach us, well, maybe if I do these things myself on a consistent basis, maybe it's gonna have some benefits. So I've already talked about some of these. Moving your body, right? And that's for the reasons that I've already said. Having the right outlook. So having a purpose in your life, being able to downshift and not be on 24/7, like so many of us, who are probably watching this right now. Eating wisely, using the 80% rule, so that you're not eating until you're completely stuffed. You're eating until you're about 80% full, and then that's good enough. We see that in a lot of cultures. A plant slant diet, where you're eating a high percentage of your calories are coming from whole, unprocessed plant foods. Doesn't mean you need to become a vegan. Doesn't mean you need to, avoid meat, but it does mean that you need to get more plants in your diet. So, 30 plant challenge, Mediterranean diet, that kind of stuff. Wine at 5. This isn't just about alcohol. It's about the social aspect of having a glass of wine. It's about downshifting. It's about turning things off. It's about having a wind down routine, which I talk about a lot when I talk about sleep quality. And then connections. We'll talk about connections in just a little bit, but this is really, really important. Do you feel like you belong to a community? Do you feel like you have loved ones and that you are loved? Are you in the right tribe where people support you and are like-minded and things like that? So like these are all very, very important. They call them the Power 9. And I think that if we focus on these kinds of things, plugging these into our own lives, they're gonna really pay dividends like they do for the people who live in those blue zones. It doesn't mean that you need to pick up and move to Sardinia, Italy, in order to get these benefits. We can do that right where we are, and that's one of the things that our retreats at Three Waves Wellness are all about. We teach people this kind of stuff so that they can take it back to their busy lives in Los Angeles or New York City or Orlando or Dallas or Seattle, wherever they're coming from. And, it's not just, a 3-day retreat where you go and you do something fun and then you go back to your normal life. You go back to your normal life equipped with practical strategies that you can use to help yourself feel better and think better and perform better. Okay? This is the opposite of what we see out there in the world, though. And it really is frustrating for a scientist that is trying to help people that we see things like this. We see, biohackers that are just looking at nonsense, exaggerated, overhyped kind of things. This is one of the most famous of them, a guy named Brian Johnson, tech mogul who has millions of dollars to spend on peptides and injections and testing and all kinds of different things, and he just realized he has an autoimmune system condition called AIG, is autoimmune gastritis, where his immune system is attacking his gastrointestinal tract, right? So this is not a good situation, right? And I'm not saying that his biohacking caused any of this, but it just goes to show that if you're focusing on the wrong stuff, it's not going to be helpful for you, right? And in his case and lots of other cases, it's not. This is my longevity pyramid. It looks very much like my mental fitness pyramid. It looks very much like my mental wellness pyramid. It's the same kinds of concepts that you see in a Blue Zones kind of a construct. The foundation are the boring things. They're things like hydration and sunlight and not smoking and having a purpose and being connected to other people and things like that. And then you build on that. The things we've just talked about, movement and sleep and nutrition and stress resilience and social connections. And then we can get into some of the whiz-bang stuff, right? I'm an advocate for supplements, right? Science-based supplements where there's good research, long historical, traditional use, that kind of stuff. And so I'll talk to people about the supplements that I formulate because, they're based on science. This one, for example, Zenith, 8 different research-backed ingredients in this one product that have dozens of human clinical trials on them. So there's some real science here to help you with your mood and your mental focus and your energy levels and your stress levels and your resilience and all that kind of stuff, right? So that's great, but that's probably not where you're going to start. Unless you start here so that you feel somewhat better, and then if your stress is lower, now maybe you'll eat better, and now maybe you'll sleep better, and now maybe you'll move your body more, right? Like I get that a lot of people come to supplements to say, let me do that. Let me hit the easy button. I'll do this first, and then that can help me do some of those other things, right? I think that's a legitimate way to go, but it's also a legitimate way to go is to say it's the cherry on top where you've done all this stuff and then you use a supplement to bring it all together. This up here is where a lot of these biohackers focus on, right? All these people who are selling wellness peptides online right now, and if you're starting here and you haven't built the base of the pyramid, you're gonna fail. I've done a whole deep dive about peptides, and I'm not anti-peptide, I'm not pro-peptide, but I think we need to put them in their proper context, right? I don't want anybody taking a supplement, whether I've formulated it or not. I don't want them taking a supplement and thinking that it's going to replace their need for good nutrition or their need for physical activity or their need for social connection or exposure to nature or the right mindset or any of that kind of stuff, right? So why would you think you could do the same thing with peptides, right? Why do you think that an injection is going to be any better? And in fact, if you start doing some of those peptide injections and you're unbalanced in any of the ways that we've just talked about, if your microbiome is out of balance or you're overinflamed, or you have leaky gut, or any of that stuff is out of balance, that peptide is not going to deliver the benefits that you think it's going to deliver. It might deliver a little bit of benefits, but if you had all those other things in balance, it might deliver great big benefits, right? So it really is about the overall context that we put all this in. And so longevity is built, it's not bought, and it's built from the bottom up, not from the top down, right? It really is about that overall foundation is what builds your adaptive capacity, and it ultimately gives you more energy and more life and more life in your years, kind of an ideal. So I'm gonna end up with this. The future is very personal, right? So I already shared with you I'm 58. I'll be 59 next month. You look at that and you go, average life expectancy is what in the, probably for males of, my generation is low 80s. So I've got 20 something years left to live. I want that to be a hell of a lot more, right? I do want to be that person that lives to be 100. So it's personal in a sense that this kind of stuff that I'm studying and this kind of stuff that I'm educating about is me search as much as it is research, right? Because it's about me. It's about me living longer and me not becoming frail. But part of that is that right now, as you're watching this, I'm actually in Iowa. I'm riding a race called RAGBRAI. So this stands for Registers, which is the name of a newspaper, Registers Annual Great Big Ride Around Iowa, or something like that. It's a ride from one side of Iowa to the other side of Iowa. I try to practice what I preach. I try to not just tell you guys all these things that I've told you in this masterclass. I try to do the hard things. I try to eat right. I try to move my body. I try to, balance my stress. I try to do all this in a very science-based way. I also try to have fun while I'm doing it. So here's Iowa. This ride goes from the western side of Iowa to the eastern side of Iowa, and they do a really cool thing. You dip your back tire of your bicycle in the Missouri River at the start, and then when you get to the other side, the eastern side of Iowa, you dip your front tire in the Mississippi River. So Missouri River to Mississippi River, and that's what I'm doing this week. So I recorded this, and that's why it's playing as a premiere on YouTube. Because we have to not just preach this, we have to practice this as much as possible. So it's not just my physical activity that is good; it's also from a social connection perspective. I'm going with a couple of really good friends. We're going to meet a lot of people who aren't our friends yet, but they will be by the end of this 400 or so mile ride. The future of longevity won't belong to people chasing one miracle molecule. It will belong to those who improve their adaptive capacity. And the way that we do that is all the things that I've just shared. So if you like this kind of stuff and you want to dive more into the microbiome or leaky gut or mental wellness or any of that kind of stuff, definitely go, stay on this YouTube page and subscribe. And you can find a lot of other information, some free information, some premium information about mental fitness and adaptive capacity and neurobiotics and, gut-brain axis and microbiome and all the things if you go to doctalbot.com. I'm going to share with you. So that's the end of tonight. I'm going to share with you all my other websites. Please follow me on Facebook and Instagram, and check out the products that I do. Check out the retreats that we do at Three Waves B&B. Try to put out as much information as possible, and hopefully you can consume it and share it with others. And I'll see you next time. Okay, thanks. Bye bye.